Hello DMs, welcome back to Master of Dungeons. In today's vid I will continue my analysis of Call the Netherdeep and take a look at chapter 3, Bazzoxan. Personally this is my favourite chapter. It has everything: monsters, fun dungeon, riddles and a famous-ish NPC. This is also the ideal chapter to start trickling in your player's backstory stuff. If you've never run a module before or even a roleplay, modules are usually really hard to add personal stuff from your players over a homebrew setting. The best examples of this are things like Curse of Strahd, where you're literally in a pocket dimension with no access to your players' lives, or Descent into Avernus, where unless your players' family's souls are in the Nine Hells, they're not really going to show up. Call the Netherdeep gives the illusion of an open world, enough that you're able to add in some personal stuff from your players. A perfect moment is here in Bazzoxan. If any of your players happen to be from Jorhas, this is a perfect moment to add someone from their life. They could be an Aurora Watch soldier or something that like that, as Bazzoxan is a military town. It also adds in question a tiefling and a member of the Cobalt Soul from Ankarel, so if any of your players have ties or knowledge of the Cobalt Soul, this is another thing you can tie to your players. In my campaign, the biggest connection the players had was that the barbarian was looking for her mother, who had gone missing. I had sightings in each location, so it helped push the story forward, and I trickled in the sort of people she was travelling with. Also in my campaign, I had a drow who, when she was younger, thought she was abandoned by her father or he died. I had him be one of the soldiers in Bazzoxan and attempted to use him to challenge her preconceptions of the Luxon, which is the primary god of the Kryn dynasty. So Bazzoxan opens all things ago with the city under attack from an incursion of gibbering mouthers. Now these are only a challenge rating 2 monster, but fun nonetheless. They're slow as anything, but have them just start right next to the players. Their gibbering is a really fun attack, as is their blinding spittle, which you'll want to do as often as possible. If they don't decide to flee, have one for each player, and have the NPCs also too tangled up so they can't help the players until a round or two in. This is also where we add in the semi-famous NPC. Those of you who are fans of Critical Role Campaign 2, this is Essex Thalis' brother Verin, who's a pretty cool Echo Knight and commander of Bazzoxan. If they don't help out and decide to run away, the book tells you to have random mouthers pop up to attack the party anyway. Really just do the same things, one for each player, and just do a single combat. The only difference is that the NPCs aren't there, and this will have a knock-on effect with the rivals and future interactions, which I'll discuss in a bit. So this is also the first book I've seen where they change up the random encounters. I'd actually started doing this in my own games, and I've got a video on how I run encounters, but the random encounter table in Bazzoxan is just a series of scenes for the players to see as they walk through town. It's really quite excellent. First, the sections of the town the book tells you if the players decide to run and hide rather than help Verin Thalis. Io gets injured and you'll find them in the infirmary. Otherwise it doesn't really tell you where to put them, so they can be anywhere, probably interacting and learning about Betrayer's Rise. Now this gives you the biggest decision for you as a DM. Do you want the rivals to become friends or foes? Probably best to let your players choose how invested they are in being friends with the rivals, but this is the perfect opportunity to turn them to foes, because really you can just have Io injured no matter what, and then they blame the players for their action. It will set them on a path for something in Betrayer's Rise, where it is the best moment to steal the Jewel of 3 Prayers too. The map gives you 7 locations in the town before Betrayer's Rise. I have no idea why they've marked the gates. They're completely pointless except to denote where you enter the map. The crematorium is pretty huge. It adds a pretty massive NPC in the name of Prolix Yusef, who is a member of the Allegiance of Allsight, which are one of the 3 major factions that will appear in Chapter 4. Play him right and he can get the PCs to help him spy on another NPC added later who works for his rival faction, who are also one of the other majors in Chapter 4. Also here the PCs can get a pretty awesome magic item, so it's a good idea to try and guide them here at the very least. The infirmary will most likely be where you find the rivals, if I was injured, and of course another opportunity to twist the rivalry if you want to push towards hostility between the rivals and your PCs. You also meet a priest who is a follower of Zalakas, who, if you don't have Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, I suggest looking her up. She's pretty cool lesser deity with her own interesting story, which would make for a great god for a cleric or a paladin in another Exandria setting. The barracks is where you'll most likely find Varian Thalis once things calm down, and gives you some information of the 3 factions about town. He also gives your players permission to enter Betrayer's Rise, which they can't enter until they get this, so it's pretty important they end up here. Also in the infirmary, as you leave, a soldier asks the players to drop off something at the wall of the Unforgotten, which is a nice little memorial. My players were the sort of a-holes that were cagey and suspicious of everything, so when they get to the wall and meet Kalim, he made them feel really bad about themselves and almost refusing the soldiers' request even. It's a nice little interaction, but considering the players are here to find out about the Jewel of 3 Prayers, it can make them feel like it's a waste of time. The dilapidated temple is pretty cool and gives you a chance to be a nice friendly gardener type rather than the stuffy soldiers that have appeared so far. He's much less dour and can add some brevity in such a bleak location, and helps with a bit of Elixian vision and gives you a chance to add some more good impressions of him. The Ready Room is the tavern and your most important location. It gives you Question, who is a tiefling working for the Cobalt Soul and studying Betrayer's Rise, and those librarian book nerds can be full of tasty information. The other person is Aloysia Telfin, a member of the Consortium of the Vermilion Dream and 3rd major faction in Chapter 4. Now, although the Consortium aren't technically the evil faction, they have a lot of evil members and they're pretty greedy. If your players don't side with them, then that's who the rivals side with. In the wonderful Exandria Discord, I see this question pop up a lot, but it's what happens if the party accept Aloysia's offer to lead her into Betrayer's Rise. What happens if she offers to pay the players to take her into Betrayer's Rise for learning reasons? The players can accept to turn this down. The way I played it was, as soon as she saw the Jewel of 3 Prayers, her greed got the better of her. My players were only offering to do recon and report back, so she went and hired the rivals. Now, if the players accept her offer, I still think her greed will get the better of her, so after the acceptance, she'd cover her bases, hire the rivals, and then later, when things happen in Betrayer's Rise, she'd have the rivals appear as a contingency plan. Last part of this chapter is Betrayer's Rise, a once evil temple of the Betrayed Gods that it still spews out evil things. Inside, it gives a potential random encounter table to add more monsters if your players decide to leave and come back, or if you want more deadly. To be honest, I find it's pretty dangerous, and I'll explain why in a moment. In the vestibule, there are 3 exits to move further into the dungeon, but it's the secret door that leads to R4, the Path of Emptiness, which can make a really deadly dungeon. For a start, the door is one way, so they can't go back, and this has a chance to split the party. It's only a DC 15 wisdom check, however anyone who fails it can't get through for an hour, but that's metagame knowledge your players won't know, so not every player will go through, and that's certainly what happened with my group. They were split in 2. The other cool thing is if they work out the skull vase, especially if they lose something personal, it's quite detrimental to their own personal stories. Although the spider's chancel has 2 driders, which would be an awesome encounter as they have spider climb, so they can stay up in the wall as or ceiling, and that's a nice magic. And there's a nice magic item in there. If some or all of your players get through the secret door, the Cloister of Penitence spits out 3 flame skulls, and this fight is amazing. In my campaign, my party wizard, bard and ranger were on their own, separated from the rest of the party, and the chronology wizard's offensive spells were cold as the player liked the theme of freezing time, which the skulls are immune to. The most deadly thing your skulls can do is drop a fireball on their own heads. They're immune to fire damage, and 8d6 fire damage will hurt a lot. Shield is also a great way to keep your skulls alive for longer, otherwise I'd use its fire ray as much as possible. An advantage on spell saves makes this encounter pretty challenging, especially for a level 5 party, even more so if they're split. The bladed corridor trap is also great, especially if they don't split how much damage they take and work out what to do here. As I said earlier, in the soldier chamber, in the spider chamber even, the driders would stay up on the ceiling and attack from afar, while letting spiders get in close for a nice distraction and meat shield. The basilica is a bit overly convoluted for what it is. The way I did it was I overly emphasised the dancing flames and enticing a player, and as soon as they danced with one, I had it light up the correct section in the sequence. Climbing down from R10 to R12 is also entertaining, especially if someone fails and doesn't have the further fall. The wailing statue in R12 is great, especially for anyone who falls victim to it. A DC 16 charisma save isn't getting past too often, especially for non-charisma focused classes like clerics, barbarians and wizards. And then following up with a DC 16 wisdom save or they're attacking each other is also quite entertaining. The fight against the orcs in the blood room isn't that exciting. It can take a while unless the party stay at range. You'll want to keep the orcs in the blood as they're immune to the fire damage and it'll hurt any martial classes. In my aerial attackers video, I cover a combat using of rocks, so I suggest you check that out for the penultimate room. There's also a cool potential exit for the players, which my party used with the fairy wizard using the help action while flying to help any players on their way out. Which brings us to our final most important room and the reason your players are here. The prayer site of Evandra does a lot. First, it turns the jewel of 3 prayers from dormant to awakened, which anyone who knows what a vestige is wants this to happen. Next, it gives another vision of Elixion, but this one is interactive, so the players have a chance to talk to him. This is your chance to add in that sympathy and heroism I've spoken about before. Gives you the opportunity to really hammer home he's someone in need of saving. In my game, I didn't do this enough, and by the end, my players were still undecided what to do. It also gives you a chance to drop in some Ankrel hints and things, as that's the next location. And finally, once the interaction is over and your players wake up, it gives you a chance to add in the rivals. As I said before, if Aloysia is there and she's seen the jewel, she's so greedy she wants it and has hired the rivals to steal it for her. If the rivals are friends of your players, they'll turn on her, but if they're indifferent or enemies, it's a fight for the jewel. Now, I've also done a combat analysis on the rivals' tier 2 stat blocks, which is what they use here, and is actually the only time you'd actually use them, because after here, once they're in Ankrel, they get to their tier 3s. But essentially, the rivals would use any knowledge they'd already accumulated, focus on the one who had the jewel first, then anyone not as heavily armoured. Please check out my video for more details. I really believe it will help you. Aloysia only waits a couple of rounds before escaping, which is what I did. I had her hold an action to crush her teleportation tablet and escape with the rivals after stealing the jewel. This made all my players want to hunt them down for revenge and was a really great motivation to move them on to the next chapter quite swiftly without any dithering around. Then, after Aloysia goes, the question is where next. You can use Question, Varian or Prolix all to guide your players to where Aloysia has gone. If you like Aloysia and want your players to join her faction for the consortium missions in Chapter 4, why not just have her teleport with them immediately to Ankrel, then when the rivals show up later, they're with the Allegiance or Cobalt Soul. Anyway, this has been my look at Chapter 3 of Call the Netherdeep. Next I'll look at Chapter 4, which is Ankrel, the biggest and most open chapter of the book, which gives you a chance to really add in large amounts of personal character stuff and side missions, which I'll discuss in my next video. Well, thanks for watching, take care, thanks for all the support, and until next time, happy hunting.